What if we told you that fairies actually existed? They danced among the flowers and played with woodland creatures. Would you believe it? It may sound like a fairy tale, but in the early 1900s, two young girls in Cottingley claimed to have captured photographs of real fairies. These photographs gained widespread attention and sparked a public debate on the existence of fairies. But were these photographs real, or just a clever deception? Let's uncover the truth behind the Cottingley Fairies. So, the story goes like this. Back in the summer of 1917, a young 9-year-old girl named Frances Griffiths and her mother took up residence in Yorkshire in the home of Frances's cousin, Elsie Wright, who was 16 at the time. Now, you may ask why they left their home in Cape Town, South Africa. It was because of the First World War. Frances's dad was a soldier in the army who was fighting in the war, and so her mother decided to move to Britain for safety. At that time, the two girls had a significant age gap, but they quickly became inseparable. After all, they were still kids. They spent hours together, enjoying the beautiful countryside around their home. Their favorite playground was a ravine tucked away at the backside of the Wright family's garden in Cottingley. Now, here's where things get interesting. The girls, after one too many adventures in the garden, returned home with clothes that were soaking wet and laden with mud. At this point, the adults of the house decided to ask the girls what they were up to down in the garden. They responded that they were playing with fairies in the garden. To them, it wasn't a part of make-believe games or childhood fantasy. They insisted that they had indeed been playing with real fairies. The answer made the adults rather skeptical, turning a simple query into a much larger discussion. Elsie's father wanted to explore the actual truth, so he decided to lend the girls his camera. Not long after, the two returned, and they seemed pretty excited about capturing the photographs of the fairies. Arthur took the photographic plates to his darkroom to process them. He was shocked that the photographs had captured small, fairy-like creatures dancing in midair. At the same time, Mr. Wright could not help but laugh off the images. He was of the view that it was nothing but the girls' creativity. His wife's astonishment matched his disbelief, but for entirely different reasons. She saw something magical in those photos, something that validated age-old tales of mystical lands and creatures. She got so excited that she took the photographs to a local lecture on fairies organized by the Theosophical Society. She had no idea that these pictures would soon cause a great deal of curiosity and controversy. This tale of the Cottingley Fairies was about to become a national sensation. At that time, a man named Edward Gardner was attending the lecture where the fairy photographs were displayed. Being a prominent figure in the local theosophical community, he was captivated by the images. To unravel the mystery, he took it upon himself to dive deeper. He enlarged the photos and had the negatives examined by reputed photographers. Although some experts showed skepticism, citing the extravagant Parisian hairstyles of the fairies or their dramatic appearance, Gardner was undeterred. During all this, the photographs caught the eye of Arthur Conan Doyle, a name synonymous with the famous detective series Sherlock Holmes. But Doyle was not just an author. He was also a passionate spiritualist, despite his Catholic upbringing and comprehensive scientific education. His interest in spiritualism began in the 1800s, and by the time of the First World War, he was one of its firm advocates. The captivating fairy photographs found a place in Doyle's lectures on spiritualism and even made their way to various spiritualist publications. After this, an exciting opportunity arose for Doyle. He was requested to write an article about fairies for the Strand magazine's December 1920 edition. His plan was to feature the eye-catching photographs taken by Frances and Elsie. But he didn't stop there. Doyle hoped for additional photographic evidence. In a generous gesture, he gifted each girl a high-quality cameo camera, hoping they might capture another fantastical creature on film. His patience was rewarded quickly. The girls returned with 3 more photographs, adding to the existing collection. After publishing the article, Fairies Photographed, everyone started discussing the Cottingley Fairies. People were curious and couldn't believe what they saw. Only a month later, The Guardian reported a big crowd of reporters outside a full theater. They were there for a talk by Edward Gardner. To keep the girls safe, the article changed their names and where they lived. But the Cottingley Fairies story was still far from done. Meanwhile, Arthur Conan Doyle found himself deeply involved in writing a book about the fascinating fairy phenomenon. In 1922, he published The Coming of the Fairies. In his book, he openly recognized the controversial nature of the fairy photographs. He represented a candid opinion about the Cottingley fairy photographs. He suggested two contrasting perspectives on the images. One, they could be an ingenious hoax, successfully fooling the public. Alternatively, they might signify a transformative event in human history, potentially groundbreaking in future viewings. But still, not everyone was ready to jump on the fairy belief bandwagon. Indeed, the tide of disbelief began to gain momentum. A California newspaper in November 1922 published an article with the headline, "Poor Sherlock Holmes, Hopelessly Crazy?" As the title suggests, the skepticism was fiercely tangible. The public discourse was becoming a battleground, with the believers on one side and the skeptics on the other. This was more than a tale of two girls. It was a narrative of belief and disbelief, of magic and reality, of innocence and cynicism. As the controversy raged on, everyone was left questioning, was the Cottingley Fairies merely an elaborate hoax, or a monumentous discovery of an unseen world? A fellow physician, Major John Hall Edwards, denounced the fairy photographs. He argued that introducing children to such absurd ideas could lead to neurological and psychological disorders in their later life. He also unveiled that Elsie Wright had prior experience as a photography apprentice. Despite the criticism, Arthur Conan Doyle was unbudged and addressed the critique in his book, The Coming of the Fairies. During this controversy, Elsie and Francis moved on with their lives, traveling to various countries and eventually settling back in England long after the fairy frenzy had died down. Then, in the 1980s, the saga of the Cottingley Fairies saw a resurgence. In an article for the British Journal of Photography, British journalist Geoffrey Crawley revealed that the photos were a hoax. Unexpectedly, he received a letter from one of the original photographers, Elsie Wright, who was in her 80s by then. Wright confessed to the fabrication, thanking Crawley for understanding the pickle they had found themselves in. She admitted that the fairies were nothing more than a practical joke that spiraled out of control when her mother showed the photos to Edward Gardner. The fairy images had been crafted from illustrations in Princess Mary's gift book and positioned for the camera using hat pins. By the time Arthur Conan Doyle had published The Coming of the Fairies, the girls were too deep into the fiasco and scared to admit the truth. The backlash Doyle faced for defending the photos made Elsie hesitate to reveal the scandal. Francis was getting bullied at school over it, and Elsie was plagued by guilt. After Elsie had admitted the truth, Frances Griffiths, the other half of the Cottingley duo, also came forward. She echoed Wright's sentiments, expressing her bafflement to the BBC. "I can't understand to this day why people were taken in," she confessed. "They wanted to be taken in." Despite her confession, Frances clung to a shred of the fantastical tale. She insisted until her death that one of the photographs, Fairy Sunbath, the fifth and final taken by the girls, did depict real fairies. As the years rolled on, spiritualism in the United Kingdom underwent a slow, steady decline, particularly after the introduction of the Fraudulent Mediums Act of 1951. This legislation made the act of pretending to contact the dead for profit an illegal offense, subject to punishment. Nevertheless, the act was repealed in 1980, and even to this day, spiritualism and theosophy are practiced in certain circles. The Cottingley Fairies hoax, despite its unraveling, has carved its place in modern history as one of the most well-known deceptions. A story born from the innocent play of two girls grew into a national sensation, polarizing public opinion and captivating the masses with a glimpse into the unseen world of fairies. It serves as a reminder that even in the age of science and technology, there is still a place for wonder and imagination in our lives. If you enjoyed the video, Give it a big thumbs up and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Also, let us know in the comments if you want to see more videos on similar topics. You can also check out our previous video on South African apartheid. Goodbye until next time.